I've been a little bit rainbow happy lately, which is okay with me. I made this, and I fell in love with the yarn French knot clouds. I just loved making them and loved how they came out. So I made another one. It looks like this. And as I was going along with this, I decided that I would go ahead and make a pattern. So this pattern has 6 different mix and match rainbows that we can make. Previously, I had made this pattern, which has the same satin stitch, and I loved how the little clouds came out with the different accent colors to help to highlight the clouds. On the way to creating this one, I first created this, but I just didn't love how the lettering came out. I didn't like the color of embroidery floss I had chosen. So I'm taking the lettering out and we'll do something else with it at some point, but I did absolutely love making this rainbow with the wool felting. And I always wanted to make another felted wool rainbow, so that's what we'll be doing today. I used a 9-inch piece of blue fabric, a 4-inch hoop, a sharp end 24 DMC chenille needle, my handy needle threader, my Frixion transfer pen, which disappears with heat, scissors, and then the wool felting supplies, a wool felting pad, a felting needle, and then embroidery floss and wool roving for the assorted colors for the rainbow and for the cloud. And lovely wool roving is available in many Etsy shops. That's where I got all of mine. For this rainbow, I thought I might try just doing 3 colors, orange, green, and purple. It was a little bit of a different concept for me, but I thought I'd just give it a try and see what we came up with. The easiest way to trace is to put the fabric into the hoop upside down, essentially, and that makes it so that the fabric lays flat against your tracing surface. I initially started with these hand-drawn rainbows and clouds, and you can definitely do that. But then I did end up making that pattern that is available in my Etsy shop, and that's what I'm using here to trace. I have it up against a light box, but you can certainly just hold it up against a window with some light coming through, and that works just as well. And this Frixion tracing pen disappears with heat, so when you're done with your project, all you have to do is run it under a hot iron. With the tracing done, I like to put my piece into this plastic hoop now. This is the hoop that I use to do all my embroidery because it holds the fabric really nice and tightly. I like to outline my shape with 6 strands of embroidery floss using a reverse split stitch. The outline simply acts as a boundary for when you are doing the wool felting. It not only gives you a place to put the wool, but it also helps while you're doing the felting because it gives you a place to rest the needle up against as you are doing your felting. Reverse split stitch is just coming up through the fabric and making 1 straight stitch, and then the next time you come up a little further away and you go back down through the middle of the stitch right before it. You're splitting the strands of the previous stitch, which is why it's called reverse split stitch. It's a simple stitch and it acts as a nice border for the wool felting. So the first thing that I like to do is go ahead and do that reverse split stitch on each of the traced lines. including for the cloud. For the cloud for this project, I did use the 6 strands of embroidery floss for this reverse split stitch, but I made a subsequent project using 4 strands of the embroidery floss for around the cloud, and I did actually prefer that, but you could do it either way. I like to use an embroidery floss in a complementary color to the wool that is going to be going in that section or up against the embroidery floss. You won't see it very much, but you'll see it a little bit in places, so it's nice to have it be a complementary color. So once you've done all of the stitching on the traced lines, I like to go ahead and remove the tracing pen with an iron and place the piece back into the hoop upside down so that when it is placed up against the felting surface, the fabric will be laying flat. The wool roving comes in lots of different textures. Some of them will be thicker, some of them will be really wispy. The wispy wool roving will take a little bit more felting, whereas the thicker wool roving will come together a little bit more easily. And you'll see as I'm going along that I'm using that embroidered edge to place the needle right up against to help me to put the wool roving in the section where I want it. And it's just continuously using this felting needle to push the fibers into the fabric. And then once you've gone along for a little while, you're also pushing the fibers into the wool roving, so it's securing it all in place. One thing about crafting is that even with a pretty solid idea of what you're going for, if it's never been made before, then you don't know exactly how it'll turn out. But we jump in anyway, curious. Most of what I make feels like a bit of an experiment. If I have an idea, I usually just go with it because how else will I know? I did change my mind midway through and decided that I wanted a little bit of red and yellow and blue, so I added those in. You may sort of wonder when it's fully felted, and I don't know that there's such a thing. It's really just continuing to felt it until you like the texture of it. The more you felt it, the tighter the texture will be. If you want a little bit of a looser texture, perhaps for the cloud, if you want the cloud to be a little bit more fluffy, then you just can felt it a little bit less than you do with the rainbow. And I can just see here as I'm going along, I'd like a little bit more green in there. And then I would like to add some accent colors to the cloud as well. I like to add a little bit of gray along the bottom and a little bit of pink and yellow because that's what I see when I look at the clouds. Time for painting the hoop now. I call my wooden hoops my frames, and I love to do a bit of a color mixing to get just the right color. I'm going for this purple color here from the rainbow. It took me a while this time to get the right color because I was working with some very old paints from actually probably my childhood. But I eventually got the color that I was going for, and I can go ahead and put the rest of this paint back in a bottle for another time. Now it's time to go ahead and cut off the excess fabric on the corners. I like to cut the fabric to about 2 inches all the way around. And then taking a very long piece of thread, it's just a matter of making these very wide stitches all around the outside of the fabric and then going ahead and pulling the thread to gather the fabric over the back of the hoop. Then I like to go around 2 times and pull it tightly so that there's not a lot of gathered fabric that leans up against the wall when it's hanging. So here it is then, our felted wool heart rainbow with cloud. Thank you for being here.